high school student starts seeing a shadowy figure lurking near campus. As the sightings increase, strange notes appear, and the student realizes they are being stalked. When the stalker finally reveals himself, the encounter turns dangerous, but the student escapes and exposes the stalker, forever changed by the ordeal. I never thought anything creepy could happen at my high school. You know how it is? Just a bunch of kids trying to get through the day, focusing on grades, gossip, and planning the next big party. But then, it all changed for me last fall. It started in September. I was a junior, juggling homework, cheerleading practice, and the usual teen drama. One afternoon, I was hanging out with my friends near the entrance when I caught a glimpse of someone standing by the tree line just beyond the parking lot. At first I thought it was just my imagination. I mean, who wouldn't see a shadowy figure and freak out a little? But then, I couldn't shake that feeling. Something was off. As the weeks went by, I kept seeing that same figure. Sometimes it was just a blur in my peripheral vision, like a silhouette darting away whenever I turned to look. Other times, I'd catch it standing in the same spot, staring directly at the school. It was like I was living in a horror movie, except I wasn't the main character who fights back. I was the girl waiting for the jump scare. I decided to tell my friends, but they laughed it off. "You're just paranoid, Emma. It's probably just someone from the neighborhood." They'd joke and roll their eyes, but I could see the worry etched in their faces, like they were trying to convince themselves that I was overreacting. Then, things escalated. I remember one evening, staying late to finish a project. The library was almost empty, and as I packed up my stuff, I noticed a cold draft. It was just me and the librarian, and yet I felt like someone was watching me. I brushed it off as nerves, but when I turned to leave, I caught a glimpse of that figure through the glass doors. This time, I could see it more clearly. A tall, slender person, cloaked in darkness, their face hidden under a hoodie. My heart raced as I sprinted to my car, hands shaking as I fumbled with my keys. I started keeping track of the sightings. I'd jot down every time I saw that figure, trying to convince myself that it was just a coincidence. But it wasn't. I'd see it in the same spots, near the parking lot, around the bleachers, even behind the gym. Each encounter tightened the knot in my stomach. Then came the notes. One day, I found a folded piece of paper in my locker. My heart dropped when I opened it. "I see you, Emma. You're beautiful." The handwriting was shaky and barely legible, but the words were clear enough to send chills down my spine. My friends tried to laugh it off, saying it was probably some dumb prank, but I knew better. This was serious. I went to the principal, but all I got was the usual, "We'll look into it" response. They probably thought I was just some dramatic girl trying to stir up trouble. But I wasn't. I could feel it. The stalker was getting closer and I was scared. One Friday night, I had to leave a game early. I was parked at the far end of the lot, and as I walked toward my car, the hairs on the back of my neck stood up. That feeling was back, the heavy weight of being watched. I glanced around, and there he was. The figure stood by the trees, closer than I'd ever seen before. I could make out the hoodie. The way the shadows cast over his face made it impossible to see anything but darkness. I was frozen. My mind raced, screaming at me to run, but I was rooted to the spot. Suddenly, the figure moved, taking a step forward. That's when I snapped back to reality. I bolted for my car, throwing myself inside and locking the doors as fast as I could. My heart pounded in my ears as I started the engine, glancing in the rearview mirror to see him standing there, watching me drive away. That weekend, I barely left my house. I was a prisoner in my own life, too terrified to go to school or hang out with my friends. I stayed glued to my phone, scrolling through social media, hoping for a distraction. But all I could think about was that figure, that note, and the suffocating fear that I couldn't escape. On Monday, I decided I had to confront this. I couldn't live like this anymore. After school, I went back to that spot by the trees, determined to find out who this person was. I stood there, heart racing, calling out, "Who are you?" Silence answered back, and I felt like a complete fool. But just as I turned to leave, I heard a voice behind me. "You shouldn't have come here." I spun around, and there he was, face illuminated by the fading light. It was one of my classmates, someone I had never paid much attention to. His eyes were wild, and I felt that familiar surge of fear. "I've been watching you, Emma," he said, stepping closer. "You're special. You don't know how beautiful you are." I backed away, but he grabbed my wrist, his grip surprisingly strong. "You can't run away from me. I just wanted to get to know you." I struggled to pull away, adrenaline coursing through my veins. "Let me go." In that moment, I realized that he was serious. This wasn't some harmless crush. He was obsessed. With everything I had in me, I broke free and ran, not looking back until I reached the safety of the school. I reported him immediately, and this time, they took me seriously. I later learned that he had been in therapy for some concerning behaviors, and the school decided to expel him. I never returned to that spot by the trees, and I still can't believe how close I came to something truly terrifying. Looking back, I realize how important it is to listen to your instincts. If something feels off, it probably is. I survived, but not without carrying the scars of that experience. It changed me forever, and now I always trust my gut. No one should ever have to go through what I did, and I just hope my story helps others stay safe. A student working late in the school library begins hearing strange noises and seeing shadows, convinced they're alone. As the eerie encounters escalate, they sense someone is watching them. The student flees in panic, escaping just in time, but is left haunted by the thought of how close they came to something truly terrifying. It was just another Wednesday night at Wilson High, and I was stuck in the library trying to finish my history project. The clock ticked slowly, and the fluorescent lights above buzzed, creating an atmosphere that felt more oppressive than usual. I was the last student left, and even the librarian had long since gone home. I figured I could wrap things up in another hour or so, but that was before everything changed. I was deep into my research, headphones on and music low, when I started hearing these weird noises. At first, it was just the creaking of the old building settling, or maybe a book falling off a shelf somewhere. But then, it was like something else, an echo of footsteps. I shook it off. After all, I was the only one there, right? Just me and a bunch of dusty old books. As I typed away, I glanced up, half expecting to see someone sneaking in. But nope, just shadows dancing along the wall from the flickering lights. I went back to my screen, but the noises wouldn't stop. They felt like they were getting closer, so I pulled my headphones off to listen. My heart raced, and I was sure I heard a door creak open in the back of the library. "Hello?" I called out, but only silence answered back. I rolled my eyes, telling myself it was just my imagination playing tricks on me. I tried to focus, but I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. After a while, I decided to take a break. I stood up and stretched, feeling a little uneasy as I walked over to the window to look outside. It was dark out, and the streetlights cast an eerie glow on the parking lot. Nothing seemed out of place, but still, that nagging feeling lingered. When I turned back, I noticed a shadow at the end of the aisle. It was just a trick of the light, I told myself, but something in my gut told me otherwise. My stomach twisted as I edged closer to see what was going on. I rounded the corner, heart pounding, but there was nothing there, just rows and rows of books. I felt silly for getting freaked out. Maybe it was just the stress of the project getting to me. So I took a deep breath and headed back to my desk. But the moment I sat down, I heard it again. This time, more distinct. It was a soft shuffling noise, like someone dragging their feet across the floor. "Is someone there?" I called out, trying to sound brave but failing miserably. Silence. I peered over my desk, half expecting to see someone standing there, but again, nothing. Just darkness creeping in from the aisles. Okay, this was getting ridiculous. I needed to finish this project and get home. I opened my laptop and tried to focus, but every little sound made me jump. That's when I saw it, a flicker of movement at the corner of my eye. My heart dropped as I turned to see a figure standing at the end of the aisle, just out of reach of the dim light. I squinted, trying to make out who it was, but the shadows swallowed them whole. My breath hitched in my throat. "Who's there?" I shouted, voice shaking. No response, just more silence. My instincts kicked in, and I felt like a deer caught in headlights. I grabbed my backpack and decided it was time to leave. I walked towards the exit, but the moment I stepped away from my desk, I heard the unmistakable sound of footsteps behind me. They were soft but purposeful, and they were getting closer. Panic surged through me. I sprinted for the door, heart racing, but as I reached for the handle, it felt like something grabbed my shoulder. I whipped around, ready to fight or flee, but there was no one there, just the emptiness of the library, now more menacing than ever. I threw open the door and bolted into the hallway. I didn't even look back as I dashed towards the main entrance. My feet pounded against the floor, and I could feel my pulse thrumming in my ears. When I burst through the double doors, the cool night air hit me like a wave. I didn't stop running until I reached the parking lot. I fumbled with my keys, my hands shaking, and finally, I got in my car, locked the doors, and took a moment to breathe. As I sat there, trying to wrap my mind around what just happened, I realized how close I had come to something truly terrifying. Had someone been in the library with me? Had they been watching me? The thought sent chills down my spine. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing. I parked in my driveway, jumped out, and hurried inside, locking the door behind me like I was sealing myself in a fortress. I leaned against the door, my heart still pounding. That night changed me. I realized that the world wasn't as safe as I thought, and I'd never again take a late-night walk for granted. Looking back, I wonder what would have happened if I hadn't run. Would Jason, the figure at the library, have helped me, or was he just as dangerous as the shadows lurking in the corners? All I know is that from that night on, I started to trust my instincts. Sometimes, it's better to run than to face the darkness head-on.